In this short video, we're going to run through Clause 4 of the ISO standards, context of the organisation.
What I generally say to people is think of context of the organisation as just who we are and what we're about, okay? And what influencing factors we need to understand within our business. And that can be things internal to our business that can have a significant impact, so internal issues. It could also be external issues that we are aware of, like supply chain concerns or issues associated wider in the industry, or even wider again. Also, it can be associated to what's classed as interested parties. So the standard refers to something called interested parties. Really what it's meaning there is, if something goes wrong within your organisation, who outside of your business would be interested in knowing about that? So if we think about from a health and safety point of view, that could be local authority, police, health and safety executive. Think about environment, that could be SEPA, may also be local authority. And if we think about in terms of quality, it could be that things have gone wrong. You need to make sure your customers are aware. You need to make sure that if there are external certifiers or standard assessors or anything like that, they need to be aware. So it's no business is exactly the same. There are a number of common themes within it, but there are other areas that, specifically to each individual organisation. So one of the key things that a business will be asked to do is look at the context of the organisation, identify external and internal issues. If an organisation really buys into their system and works with their system, then they should be looking at this on a regular basis. So identifying the needs of your workforce and interested parties and what those needs are. What do they expect from you? What do they expect to see? And if those things change, which may be driven by errors that have occurred previously, then you have to be able to demonstrate that you bring that back in. The context of organisation is often an area that is, say, documented in a manual or a process or a procedure, and then often forgotten about. But all companies change a little bit. And as they change, likewise also where they work, the industry, the local authority they work in, the government requirements where they work in, change as well. So it's important to recognise when change happens that you go back and just check that the context is fit for purpose. And again, one way of doing that is just auditing against what has been documented versus what you've seen going past. Things like that might be relevant to your business could be changes in supply chain, changes in political landscape, loss of key personnel, changes in leadership, legal changes, changes in environmental economics, so on and so forth. Okay, where these things happen, if these changes have a significant potential impact, then they have to be considered again what needs to be changed within the system. And also when we think about the needs and expectations of interested parties, we have to understand what information they would expect to receive, what would we expect to present to them if something changes. So could it be specification requirements? Could it be performance information? Could it be issues associated to delivery of a project, of a product? If there are changes in terms of workforce, so if you're working with a customer in a large project and there's key individuals named within that project documentation and project team, and those change, is a part of your contract that you have to document and inform interested parties about that change? What about in terms of environmental requirements? Could it be that you're changing the way you operate, the way your waste is captured? Do you need to be able to run that past SEPA to check that it's acceptable? You may have a certificate, a permit from SEPA that allows you to operate in a certain way, but if the way you operate changes, what do you need to do to go back and ensure that permit's still fit for purpose? These are a couple of examples of Internal and external issues and interested parties, and why you need to ensure that you keep on top of that. The scope, I'm not going to go into in too much details. Effectively, the scope is what you do, okay? The only thing I would say about the scope is that you can, if you're a large organisation, say with like a group level certification, a group level management system, it is possible that certain areas within that group may be operating out of scope for certain products or services. That's quite a common approach in larger organisations. I'll give you some examples of that. So if you take, for example, a oil and gas operator. So I assisted an oil and gas operator back in 2012 achieve ISO 14001. The scope of their management system was the management of oil and gas operations. Okay, the scope was not oil and gas operations. So effectively it was what they did in the office in terms of how they managed the operations from the office. The auditors didn't go out offshore or to any of the locations and assess the activities that were done at the operational level. The scope was purely around the management of that activity and not the operational side of it. So that just gives you an idea of why the scope can be quite important in terms of what the system's there to try and achieve. And when we speak about external and internal issues, it could be changes that could have an impact on your objectives, different relationships you might have with other organisations and changes that might occur. Interested parties, as I mentioned, often we have to think about what legal requirements there may be on our business and what changes, if they happen, we would have to notify about. Can also be, as well as I mentioned, contractual obligations and other requirements specific to your business or the contracts that you have. So it's just thinking about context is really, it's really who we are, what we're about, the people we interact with in terms of how our business operates, and importantly from a legal point of view and a contractual point of view, what information we say we must share and what we do share and how we share it. Also within clause 4 is demonstration that our IMS has been implemented and is maintained. And really most of the other clauses are used to demonstrate that. It's just an upfront commitment really within clause 4. So to me there's not huge amount of area for internal auditing in the context of the organisation, unless it's a company who are fairly early in their maturity of having a management system in place. If it's a fairly mature system, the level of auditing in this area is quite minimal. A couple of things, if you are involved in assisting a company or working with a company who are quite early in the process, then it's just getting a greater understanding of how the IMS functions and setting up to understand what the resources are that are required to put the system in place and implement it effectively. And that includes some of the responsibilities and authorities associated to it.
You may be interested in watching this next video, which talks about Clause 5, Leadership. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn videos.